Hi, everyone. Welcome back to episode 2 of 19 Bosses, where we pull back the shiny curtain of corporate America and tell relatable stories in hopes of helping you all navigate the business world.
I'm Julie.
And I'm Sabrina. Today, we are also joined by Buddy on the couch, per usual. I'm sure he'll turn around at some point. But today, we're bringing you a story that we like to call strip clubs and conferences. Now, if you're joining us hoping that we're going to expose people and businesses all across corporate America, this probably isn't the podcast for you. Instead, we aim to keep all people and businesses anonymous while still sharing these crazy and often relatable stories with all of you. Our hope is that you can learn something from each of Julie's stories and take those lessons on with you as you navigate your own career path. So, I'm sure that anyone listening in has experienced a boss or a colleague who has taken credit for their work, partied a little too hard at a corporate event or with a client, or they just straight up were not a team player. I'm pretty sure we all know someone like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Actually, a few people come to mind. So, if you're just joining us for the first time, you might have already guessed by the title, 19 Bosses, that this podcast is based off of stories of the different bosses over my career. The story I share with you today is about the lessons I learned from one of my first bosses. I like to refer to him fondly as Mr. Self-Serving. And while I can tell you that I wouldn't want to work for him again, ever, in any capacity, his management style or lack thereof was foundational to who I later became as a peer, a leader, and a sales professional. While the story may sound like I am complaining about not getting to party in Vegas on the company's dime, that's not what this story is about. This story is for anyone who at some point in their career desperately needed help, guidance, mentoring, call it whatever you want, just needed someone who wasn't there. Now, if you're a leader and you're listening in and any of what I am saying feels out of line to you, then guess what? You're probably part of the problem. And I would bet money that someone has a story or two about you.
I have a feeling that everyone listening in just had a flashback to a boss or two as you said that. So, I have to ask, did you give this boss the name of Mr. Self-Serving before or after this whole strip clubs and conferences event happened?
Well, actually before, but he really lived up to his name during my first ever conference in Vegas. I don't think anyone has ever left Vegas without at least one story, of course. But I, um, I guess you're probably wondering, so what could have gone wrong at this conference? Well, to start, it was just Mr. Self-Serving and I at this event. And he was the type of salesperson and leader who would rather wine and dine prospects than actually do the legwork that it took to bring new deals to the table in the first place. Again, not complaining, but there were only two of us at this conference. How about a little teamwork? Anyway, he did a good job of socializing with the prospects after I teed them up. But this was before LinkedIn even existed. I know that it's difficult for a lot of you to grasp. I totally get it. Things were just different back then. Getting contact details for prospects meant that you had to meet them face to face, introduce yourself, or perhaps someone you knew, a friend or a colleague, provided you a warm introduction.
I cannot even imagine that. I'm not even sure if I would have taken the leap into sales, nevertheless tech sales, if I had to meet everyone face to face when they were least expecting it. You know, now face to face is part of the sales job, but usually like they're later in that sales funnel. I thought being hung up on was hard enough.
Well, I mean, that is definitely challenging as well. But no offense, Sabrina, I don't know if you would have survived in tech sales at the very start of it.
Oh, okay. Shots fired. I see how it is.
No, not trying to fire shots. It was just old school at its finest. I mean, like anyone now, you had to be scrappy. But scrappy back then was different because we didn't have technology to help us and support us. Oh my gosh, wow. I keep dating myself with these references to technology that didn't exist, don't I? That's kind of embarrassing.
I mean, basically at this point, I don't think anyone would be surprised if you said that you rode a dinosaur to school.
All right, here we go. Game on. All right, so I guess it's 1-1 for those that might be keeping score out there.
Oh, now we're gonna start keeping score. All right, got it, got it. I'll remember that.
Well, we are mom and daughter. I think most parents can understand. Um, so, getting back to my story, so I was scrappy, but I was young and I was inexperienced, and I needed help learning. And I'm sure that many people listening in have felt that way at some point. Actually, I'm pretty sure that most people listening in have felt that way at some point. But unfortunately, Mr. Self Serving took advantage of my scrappy nature. Actually, before I was ready, I wasn't experienced enough to stand up for myself. So instead of giving me the guidance that I craved so much at that point in my career, he was taking credit for my work. So here I was at this conference, and believe it or not, I didn't even have a badge for the conference. I mean, can you imagine being sent to Vegas to represent your company? And while they did cover the airfare and the hotel, I didn't have a conference badge. I didn't, of course, no booth. I did have a per diem from my company, which I was thankful for. But if I remember correctly, I think it was about $30 per day. So, a
Wow.
little bit of a struggle. And since I couldn't get into the conference itself, every day was spent loitering in the lobby at the conference venue from sun up to sundown, introducing myself to anyone and everyone who exited the conference in hopes that I could strike up a conversation with the right person. This went on for 3 days. 3 days.
Oh my gosh. Anyone who's been in Vegas knows that 48 hours is basically like a marathon. 72 hours. Oh my gosh. Did you even meet anyone?
Yes, I did. When I actually found a prospect that I thought we should talk to more, I would quite literally write down their name, email, and phone number on a piece of paper in my notebook that I was
In
carrying
a,
around.
wait, in a notebook?
Yeah,
Jeez. Oh my gosh.
I know, I know, I know. I mean, that's just how it was back then. People weren't walking around with their laptops and phones and typing everything in. There's still a lot of paper floating around back then. So, but I would take this paper and then I would hand it off to my boss, and he would come by periodically to check in, see how many prospects I was collecting. But no matter how many I had, he never seemed to be quite satisfied. But he was always really enthusiastic to take these prospects out all over Vegas on the company's dime. But I guess he thought that what happened in Vegas would stay in Vegas.
What, I mean, first off, I think anyone who's been to Vegas probably hopes that one or two things had stayed there. But I mean,
Yes.
y'all were at a conference. Like, what could have possibly happened that Mr. Self Serving would have hoped that happened in Vegas would have stayed in Vegas?
Yeah, well, not only did he get in trouble later for his outrageous expense reports, I mean, our CEO was pissed. But I don't think he thought that one night in particular would ever be mentioned. You could probably figure out where I'm going with this based on the title of the episode, right? But that night was the night that he took one of our prospects, someone I had teed up, to a strip club.
Nice.
Yeah. Well, we all know that salespeople live and breathe by the phrase work hard, play hard. And I am not here to pass judgment, but it just goes to show how much he enjoyed his 3 day vacation to Vegas, and he wasn't the supportive boss that I needed at that moment.
How'd you even find out that they ended up at a strip club?
Well, funny story. I actually found this out a few weeks later when I was following up with the prospect after the conference. He casually told me how much fun he had had going to dinner, gambling, and visiting the strip club with my boss. It was almost as if he thought that I was invited and turned it down. I think he thought I knew. Nope, I had no clue.
Talk about having to have a poker face, quite literally. But I still don't get it. I mean, we talked about this horrible incident, and I don't mean to say horrible, but like I can't imagine how stressful that was for you being such a young professional. So why, after all of that, would you give Mr. Self-Serving any credit for helping lay the foundation of who you later became as a professional?
Well, Sabrina, I mean, you have to remember that we all have moments in our career that leave a lasting impression on us, good or bad. And while I was left to fend for myself during that conference, there were some things that I learned during my time working for Mr. Self-Serving that served me well later in my career. If I hadn't been forced into meeting over 100 complete strangers every day for 3 days, I may not have had the confidence to pursue leads persistently later in my career. He also taught me the kind of leader that I didn't want to be someday. And I always tried my best when I later became a leader to make sure that everything I asked of my team was something that I would also be willing to do.
Wow, I love that. What a great way to look back at this situation without resentment. I'm sure it probably took a while to get there, but now, like, looking back on what you learned, I have to know though, would there have been anything that you would have done differently, knowing what you know now?
Absolutely. So looking back, I'm not sure if all the hard work I did for that conference was worth it. I assumed that he was in my corner and wanted everyone to know how hard I had worked at that conference. I trusted him. I believed that he would make sure that everyone knew what I had worked on and teed up the conference. That was my mistake. Eventually, I went on to learn that he took credit for all of the prospects that I had brought in that were meaningful. After that, I got smart. Now, Salesforce was new at the time, and our company just hadn't adopted it yet. I
Oh
bet
my
there are
Lord.
quite a few people listening in that will cringe when I say this, but when I first started out, we tracked all leads via Excel. But I got really savvy with Excel and really became known for my ability to track prospects, deals, and clients and really allow for transparency across the company. Um, Another lesson is I would really set some boundaries with my boss to protect myself. I hope that anyone listening to this knows that you don't have to tolerate being taken advantage of.
Absolutely. What would be your biggest takeaway from working with Mr. Self-Serving?
Okay, so the biggest lesson, the most important lesson that I took away from this was to take care of myself. My physical and mental health were much more important than any conference could ever be. I'm not saying not to work hard. Absolutely, you should work hard. But in this case, I pushed myself to the brink health wise. And I actually ended up getting pretty sick after that conference. Nothing is worth risking your health over. At the end of the day, it is just a job. And if I have learned anything over my 25-year career, it is that the job won't love you back. That's why I wish I could go back and tell my younger self to give myself a break and know that I'm only human and only so much could be expected of me.
Wow. I think that's so powerful. I don't think a lot of people in jobs, no matter where they're at in their career, really grasp that. And I think that's, it's so important for people to learn to speak up for themselves and set boundaries, especially when it comes to work-life balance. I feel like it's something that a lot of young professionals learn way too late.
Yeah, well, guess what? Sometimes they don't learn it at all, and it can be very detrimental to your health, your personal life, lots of bad consequences. And one day I will share that story. But next week, I'm going to share a story that we refer to as cold calls and house parties. And if you're wondering how these two things go together, well, I guess you'll have to tune in next week.
I love this story. I'm sure everyone else is looking forward to it. I know it's back when I was much younger. So we hope to see you all next week. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye, everyone.
Bye.